In the last several winters, we've seen some extreme weather events emerge that have adversely impacted entire regions. Hindsight is 2020, as they say, and the issues that lead to these weather anomalies in parts of the world are showing the same patterns already, even showing the potential for some more severe conditions. Extreme weather events in other areas don't always motivate people to take winterization prepping seriously in their particular area. More important to us as preppers is to understand that weather patterns might not result in temperatures breaking records all the time, but the same bad weather for a more extended period, hovering in place for days and days, is a buildup to a more significant disaster. Those disasters can spill over to our safe and temperate areas. With the supply chain the way it is right now, our antiquated and poorly maintained infrastructure working beyond its design parameters, major wars, and a worldwide recession, even if our temperatures are temperate, we can still feel the ramification of another region's extreme and prolonged weather events. In this video, we're going to lay out the basics of the reported data pointing to a potentially challenging winter. Three main things are concerning: the unrelenting weather patterns that are increasing in frequency, the impact of a La Nina pattern that is dragging out much longer than anyone anticipated, and to top it all off, we've got an aging infrastructure that simply was not designed for these weather irregularities that we're experiencing at this time. In this video, we're going to cover all three of these issues and how they tie into one another to really hopefully give us a holistic picture of what we can expect this coming winter. Spoiler alert, it looks to be a challenging winter, so let's dive in. Download the Start Preparing Survival Guide to help you prepare for any disaster. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/get started for a free guide to help you get started on your journey of preparedness. Unrelenting weather. Let me start off with a discussion about extreme heat. It may seem odd to discuss extended heat waves in a video about a predicted brutal winter, but the two relate to each other, which I'll explain momentarily. My area just got out of a heat wave of 8 straight days of over 100 degrees, which set multiple records for my region. During that time, we saw several days over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, 41 degrees Celsius for the rest of the world. While these temperatures do occasionally occur in our area, typically those 8 to 10 days are spread out over an entire summer and not back to back in an unrelenting fashion. You may have noticed a similar weather pattern where you live. When it rains for days and days. Extreme weather patterns today just seem to sit over us for longer periods of time. But why are we seeing these weather patterns that are sitting with increased frequency? The following is an oversimplification, but it's important to understand what I'm about to outline to see how things will very likely play out this winter. Much is still being studied about the mechanisms and influencing factors on the jet streams. Essentially, warm air from the equator moves north and eastward. The same is generally true for ocean currents. The Gulf Stream is one of the most noted oceanic patterns in what is termed the global conveyor belt, or the thermaline circulation. In short, warm air and water flow and blow because of this pattern. Without going into the reasons, because there are multiple theories on this, a multitude of studies and terabytes of data indicate that circulation pattern is slowing. Some even theorize that it may one day stop altogether, as in the apocalyptic movie The Day After Tomorrow. We don't need to know with absolute certainty the underlying causes if we're going to focus on the impact it will have on our lives now and in the immediate future. I will leave the debate up to the scientists, but for our purposes, we just need to know that this slowing means that weather patterns cycle more slowly. Hot flows to cold, but when the cold areas are warmer, the pattern slows. Drought conditions remain in place for longer and longer. Rain falls more heavily because it's moving across the planet more slowly. Right now, parts of China, India, Pakistan, parts of southern England, Italy, France, and Belgium are experiencing torrential downpours and flooding, even as droughts linger on in regions next door. Plunging polar vortices that bring Arctic air and temperatures into the winter dive further down toward the equator and stay for longer. But here's the problem. Our infrastructure system is not built to sustain a prolonged week or more of extreme weather. And that's the exact problem that we've seen recently. Our infrastructure is built to sustain high and low temperatures, but not at the length of time that we're starting to see with increased frequency. Every piece of infrastructure equipment has a range it functions that has a high and a low, but these extremes in weather are testing our aging grid. Winter forecast. Though La Nina patterns don't typically last more than 12 months and are rarely year after year, we are in our second year of a La Nina pattern. This means the Pacific Northwest of the United States will see significant rain. Most of the West and Southwest will continue with its drought. The central states will have plunging and bitterly cold temperatures for longer, and the eastern states will have more powerful and frequent hurricanes, then conditions for blizzards beginning in January. Central Europe also suffers from the plunging polar cold, but less precipitation, so their drought continues as well. All that precipitation does eventually fall, however. Some areas will get more than average precipitation. Probably the best example of this prolonged weather pattern being slow to change is in the forecast last year that I made in a video, which I'll link to in the comments below. We shouldn't have back-to-back weather patterns that are this extreme, prolonged, and in successive years. While the temperatures might be cold or freezing where you're at, or the rain might fall for a longer period, you can't expect that it will hang around for much longer. You can expect that systems will fail from water, power, gas, basic transit, and the transportation of goods. During the Texas power outage, fuel trucks were not going into the blacked out areas to replenish fuel supplies. Many goods stopped flowing into the affected areas. In January of this year, passengers were stuck on trains for days in the Northeast as lines got canceled because of winter storms. Drivers were stranded on freeways that became frozen parking lots. So what we can take from this is that the weather patterns haven't shifted too much from what we got last year. Even if a few of these scientists and meteorologists are right, it will lean a little more towards even more record-breaking extremes this year. If you saw systems in your area fail or almost fell, you can solidly bank that you will probably see that again, especially since maintenance and part supply has not improved. Parts from China are not flowing efficiently because of the supply chain and their zero COVID lockdowns, and parts inventory here are not high. Antiquated designs. Our power infrastructure is built for peak usage hours, not days and days of peak demand. We also balance electricity rather than having the means to store most of it. When the balance gets out of whack or there's a problem somewhere, or an insulator was never installed to protect parts from extreme prolonged cold, blackouts, brownouts, permanent faults, and rolling blackouts, they're all possible. Our water infrastructure in temperate regions of the country has pipes built to sustain periods of low temperatures, but not days and days of below freezing temperatures. We have filtering, treatment, processing, pumping systems that can handle just only so many gallons per day. When rains and floods happen, as we saw in Jackson, Mississippi, the systems can go offline indefinitely. As with other systems worldwide, the giant machinery that pumps, processes, or routes these resources are often manufactured overseas. Most power companies driven to maintain profits frequently channel less money to maintenance. And add to that the difficulty getting these massive parts presented by the supply chain faltering so dramatically recently, and it's easy to see how the system has been redlining or working at reduced capacity during periods of high demand. Both are a recipe for failure. From transformers blowing at Hoover Dam to the pumps in Mississippi, this is just the start of a problem growing in magnitude and scope. So, all that to say just two things. The weather isn't necessarily always breaking records in temperature or precipitation, but it is lasting longer and stalling over areas, and our infrastructure is not really built for these long periods and is already running less than optimally for a host of reasons. Whatever the root causes are beyond the reasons I outlined here, this is not an issue of when the system will fail. It is becoming more of a question of how long the systems will go down this season. Knowing these basic facts can allow you to prep better to survive the winter. This is especially important right now as natural gas prices are soaring and supplies are dwindling. Creating and maintaining a livable habitat for yourself is imperative. This winter will very likely be as brutal as last year's winter. It could have a little more to it than normal as well. The stoppage of Russian gas to Europe will drive up global prices and will send more liquid natural gas from the United States over to European allies. Whether this winter is bad or you luck out with just a mild winter punctuated with just an extreme event or two, you would be wise to prep for the worst. We received many comments from folks in Texas about how our cold weather survival videos helped them get through that power outage. Even if your area isn't directly impacted, severe cold weather snarls supply chains and grinds manufacturing to a halt. It will mean higher prices and higher demand for critical food and fuel, regardless of where you live. It could mean outright shortages or product supply shortages. It could also mean your critical infrastructure could collapse as it is used to prop up a neighboring region's infrastructure. Next week, we're going to launch a video that will have a multitude of tips, prepping and survival practices to get you winterized. Even if the snow doesn't fall in your region or the cold doesn't come to you, you will want to watch that video. For many, this winter will mean massive rain. For others, it will result in plunging temperatures. all of us can expect even more failures of critical infrastructure and supply chains. And I hope you do as your ancestors have done for thousands of years. Take winter seriously and begin to prepare now. Remember, the fact that you're alive today means you came from a long line of survivors. Prep for the worst of all of it and hope for the best. As always, stay safe out there.